Hello, folks. Hello, how's it going? This is Evgeny from Day One Careers, and this is our weekly show where we answer all of your questions about behavioral interviews at Amazon. So, Gigi is just running a little bit late. She's going to be very soon, and while she's getting herself ready, I'm just going to take you through the bit of housekeeping and a reminder of what we do and how you can best benefit from this session. And then we're going to get straight into your questions. So you guys will know me. So I'm the co-founder of Day One Careers. My name is Evgeny. And just like Gigi, I used to be a senior Amazonian. I used to be a hiring manager, an interviewer, a senior marketer, and had a whole bunch of other things that I actually had a job. I wasn't just interviewing people to join Amazon. But that being said, I did interview quite a lot for my team and for partner teams, and what I started figuring out pretty early on is that there are plenty of folks with really good profiles that functionally would fit the job description, but um, at the interviewing skill level, folks just were not getting it. And so, unfortunately, that ended up what ended up happening is that plenty of these folks with great profiles were bombing interviews because they just weren't prepared well. And so what I started doing is running a little bit of an experiment. And this was during my, I think, last 2 months at Amazon. So I already resigned. I was planning on going to Apple. And I said, you know what? If I see someone who's interviewing with me and they have a great profile, but let's say they're about to flunk their first phone screen, rather than rejecting them outright, what I would do is I would actually progress them to the next phone screen, but I would give them some coaching at the end in terms of where they can prepare better. And lo and behold, the performance of these folks improved, which kind of comes to show that interviewing skills are coachable. You can learn them, and that's why I decided to start coaching first, and then I started selling courses. And then someone who I worked with, a client of mine, told me that actually she was also working with Gigi, who's gonna join soon, and she said that both of us were, according to her, the most credible people in the industry, which was very flattering. And she said that Gigi and I, we should meet. And so we met in a pub outside of London, and we decided to merge our businesses together under Day One Careers. And so, yeah, from 2022, Day One Careers is the business that we run. So Gigi's journey into this is similar to mine. So she was also a senior Amazonian. She was a hiring manager. She was an interviewer. And on top of everything else, she was a bar raiser. And if you are preparing for your interviews with Amazon, you know who the bar raiser is. And so for all the bar raiser specific insights, if you want them, we're going to have her. Now, the way that this show works is that we answer your questions. In order for you guys to have your questions answered, you need to come up with questions. So you will see that there is a chat box here in the live show. So just post your questions there. In fact, even before you start thinking about any questions and posting them there, just let me know if you can hear me, you can see me. I mean, you guys haven't dropped off, so I'm assuming that the audio is working and that the video is working. But let me know where you guys are joining from. But essentially, if you have a question about behavioral interviews at Amazon, just post it into the chat box. Now, just make sure that your question is about behavioral interviews at Amazon. The reason why we're asking you to think about your behavioral interviews is because, let's just put it this way: if you have an interview next week for a pre-construction manager for fulfillment centers, and you're keen to know what functional interview questions they're going to ask you. Unfortunately, because Gigi and I never had any experience with pre-construction processes for fulfillment centers, we would not be able to answer your questions on those. And this is Gigi, and I was just explaining to folks who have joined about our favorite job family at Amazon, the pre-construction manager in the fulfillment center operations.
Yeah.
We love
Wild.
those guys. Um, but anyway, so if you've got one of those jobs and you have an interview next week, unfortunately, We won't be able to advise you on the functional side of your interview. But the good news is that the behavioral side of your interview will be pretty much standardized and very similar to just about any other role at Amazon. And this is where Gigi and I can really help you. So make sure the questions are about the behavioral interviews. And then if your questions are just completely generic, like, hey, I've got an interview next week, do you have any tips? Usually our answer is, yeah, we've got plenty of tips, and all of them are inside the videos in our YouTube channel, which is how I assume you've found us in the first place. So go and look there, because for some of the kind of getting started tips and basics tips, is just, there's a lot of videos in there. But otherwise, folks, right now, from what I can tell, the chat box is empty. So it sounds like you guys don't have any questions whatsoever. So and if you don't, that's
Shall I comment on the growth of your facial hair since we last met a week ago, whilst people think about what questions they'd like to ask?
Can I
How
just
is it?
tell them about the multi-parter questions, which I've forgotten? Then yeah, please go ahead and
Oh
embarrass
yeah,
me even
sure.
more.
Do them all.
So,
Ma
uh,
raison d'être.
right. So, the chat box, I think it accepts like a limited number of characters. So if you have a long question, that's absolutely fine. Just split it into parts and number the parts. Like, now just put in number 1, then write a party question, then send it, and then number 2, and then send it. That's how we will be able to answer multi-part or longer questions. Okay. Now Gigi's about to embarrass me about my facial hair, so
Yeah,
go
how's
ahead.
it going? So we've got one question which is good, but I'd like a few more before we get going, or we'll answer one and it'll be all over again. So, folks, please do think of any other questions you have. And whilst I embarrass Yevgeny about his facial hair, and then we'll move on to the question. So, how's it going? Is it itchy? Are you liking it?
It was
What's the story?
crazy itchy until literally this week. Like I could not sleep. I could not sleep on my side at all. It was like having 1,000 needles just going yang. And my other half works for L'Oreal, so I said to her, right, can I have some like this moisturizer and that oil and this oil? And she's like, okay, fine, like I'll get it all for you. So she got it all for me, and I started using it, and it absolutely did not work.
I thought you were going to say it absolutely changed everything. It was wonderful. No, you just
Now,
had to tough it out, did you?
yeah, I just had to tough it out, and then I think, yeah, right now it's fine. I can, I actually, I'm beginning to forget it's actually there. So there you go. How's it
Oh,
looking? Is it any good?
it's looking good. I'm a fan, folks. I tell you what, there's only a few of you on here, but give us a hand up or a yay if you like Yevgeny's facial hair. Come on, you've seen the videos with and without it. Come on, let's have some responses. Sophia, I can see you're there. Come on, tell us what you think. Otherwise, this is just me getting desperate, quite honestly. All right, I'm getting desperate. All right, I won't bother. Let's move on then, shall we, Yevgeny?
Yeah, let's.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. We're done with all the housekeeping, so I think we can actually turn to questions.
All right, let's do that. Shall I take the first one,
Yeah,
seeing
go
as I
ahead.
embarrassed you there? There we go. Oh, look, it's that one again. Yay. Welcome back, Pixie. We were here last week, weren't you?
Yeah.
Um, do we recommend proactively calling out learnings or reflections in stories, or should that only come if asked? Okay, so I do have a particular strategy about this, and I don't know, Yevgeny, maybe you have something slightly different for the people that you work with, but here's how I play it. Amazon really, as you obviously know, Pixie, loves the self-reflection, loves the vocally self-critical, loves the do better next time based on learnings thing. So it is really, really good to get that information handed over to your interviewer. There are a few strategies to do it. You can just put it in at the end of your narrative. I personally favor that one for myself because then I know it's done. And I'm not particularly bothered about sounding a little bit formulaic when I do interviews. So I will always say the situation was blah, blah, blah. My goal was blah, blah, blah. My actions were blah, blah, blah. Because I'm a dyslexic and it helps for me to structure things that way. So I know that I have completed what I want to say. So I always, when I am interviewing, lob it in on the end anyway. What I suggest to some of my candidates is you've got two other strategies on top of that. the first strategy is just to wait for the interviewer to ask you it as a follow-up question. It's almost a engineered follow-up question because you know if you don't say it, they're going to want to hear it, and therefore they will ask you that follow-up question. So it's almost a way of forcing an interviewer to ask you a follow-up question that you know you already have a good solid answer for. The problem comes is if the interviewer doesn't actually ask you that follow-up question, and then the opportunity is gone, you've moved on to the next story, and you didn't get a chance to make it clear to them how wonderfully vocally self-critical you are. So to mitigate that, you've got your third strategy, which is you can hold it back for the first answer for that particular interviewer. If they don't choose to ask it of you at the end of that first question, you should assume that they are unlikely to ask it of you and the subsequent questions in that particular interview. And my suggestion would be for question number 2, question number 3, question number 4, you then put it in there organically rather than wait for them. So 3 options: do it the GG way, hold it back and try and engineer them to use that as a follow-up question, or hold it back on the first one and try and engineer it as a follow-up question. And if that question doesn't actually come, assume it won't come and do it the GG way. Does that make sense?
That makes
Got
total sense.
anything else?
I think you've covered all of the kind of.
Mm.
You've created a mutually exclusive and a collectively exhaustive framework of dealing with the learnings questions. I think
Cool.
my take on it has always been, well, kind of see how the conversation is going. If if you feel like you've been telling your opening story for ages and ages, and you just want to kind of pass it on to the interviewer and get the conversation going, that maybe kind of hold it for a little while because they're very likely to ask you anyway. But you're right, some of them do, some of them don't. Although when I was there, it was like a mantra. You literally like, is there anything you would have done differently? Is there
Yeah, so
anything you would have done
it's what I call a lazy follow-up question, right?
differently?
Everyone expects to ask it. So there's high probability someone will, but I never did because I
Yeah.
always knew that people would be assuming that I would, and I wanted meatier follow-up questions where I was kind of drilling in. So yeah, you cover all your bases that way, don't you? You make sure you've got it prepared, and then if you need it, you need it, and if you don't, you don't.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, shall
Right.
we put your doppelganger back?
Yes, doppelganger. Yes, exactly. Okay. So this one is from Sophia. First of all, thank you very much for all of your videos. Very useful. I'm preparing for an L6 loop in marketing and sales. Can you please suggest how many data points I should provide in results? Gosh, what is it? Is that how long is a piece of string?
Yes, that
Is
is a
that
how
what
long is a
makes?
piece of string question.
Because the answer is, well, it really depends, right? It depends how many data points are physically available, how many can you remember and recall and put in your notes, and how many of them are just enough without it sort of seeming that on the one hand you have no idea what you're doing, meaning you don't provide sort of any numbers um, in data points and results, and on the other hand, if you kind of what I call result bomb the interview response, it basically just appears like you're mindlessly just throwing numbers at them without even trying to think, do these numbers actually support the rest of the story that I've just
Mm.
told about? If the story was about sharing sheep, and then your results is about building barns, then come on, it doesn't really matter. So it really depends. But share, I would say, share the lowest number of the most descriptive and powerful results that just show that you've made something awesome happen for the business, the customers, or the employees, and the numbers that you're sharing is how we know that you actually did what you did. Does that work as a overall guidance?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, if you really had to have a range because you're desperate for it, I'd say somewhere between 2 and 4. Once you get beyond 4, as an interviewer, you're like, this is just numbers for numbers' sake now. If you can't impress me with 4 metrics, then 5, 6, 7, 8 isn't really going to make a difference. So I would just say somewhere, did I say 2 and 4? I meant 1 and 4. My apologies, 1 and 4. For sales and marketing, maybe 2 and 4 because they're much more metric driven roles than perhaps a software development engineer role might be. but somewhere between 1 and 4, I would
And
say.
one thing I'll just add something that just came to me. So remember, while they're interviewing you, they're typing away like crazy, right? Because they have to, they must, because they're going to be then looking at their notes in order to evaluate your responses. And then so once you get to the result stage and you start sharing those numbers, just share a number and just take a little pause. Trust me, it's useful because not everyone's a fast typer. Like I'm a very slow typer. I think Gigi, are you a fast typer?
Yes, I'm a fast typer that cares nothing about whether I've actually typed the right word and spelt it correctly. I just put down a dump of what letters and then somehow magically I know what they mean. So I'm super fast, but you're right. And I'll let you finish your anecdote because then I have an actual real life scenario of this to share with everyone.
Well, that it wasn't to know, but it wasn't really an anecdote. It was just trying to put myself back in the shoes of someone who used to interview a lot, and because if you do interview, you type a lot, and
Mm.
when a candidate actually gives you space to type, not intentionally, but if you have a candidate that's measured, who's speaking in a measured way, and once they start throwing results at you, it just goes. It used to go a long way for me if I could just breathe in, type it in, and the candidate goes and says, and then as a result of my actions, I also achieved something else and something else. It just makes it convenient for me to type in, which makes actually works for the candidate because when I go to then grading your response, I'm looking at my notes and I'm like, 30% here, 5% here.
Yeah. So to your point, I had a mock interview with coaching session with a candidate yesterday, and she was from a marketing background, and the story was about having run an A/B test, and her results were she had, I think, about 4 different metrics for each A/B, and therefore 8 KPIs to go with the 4 different metrics between the A and the B. She got confused initially as to which treatment was A and which treatment was B. So when she then went on to give me the results, it was inversed. And I was completely lost because I thought A was one thing and B was one thing, another thing. She thought she told me that A was a different thing and B was a different thing. And therefore, none of the numbers and none of the narrative after that made.
Gigi, I can't hear you.
There we go.
Well, well, okay,
I'm
all
back.
good.
I sat on my button. Painful. Don't sit on your button, people. I had to stop her and we had to go all the way back to the beginning of the results so that we could clarify that. And it was a waste of time. It was a bit embarrassing for me because I realized I had not really understood anything. And it was a bit embarrassing for her as well. And I gave her exactly the feedback that you just gave the folks here, which is when you give your results, slow down, like go slower in your results than you probably did in any other section of your story. So there we go. Yevgeny is right. That's exactly what happens. Of course, he's right. He's Yevgeny. He's always right. All right. Should pick the next one then, Yevgeny. It's mine, isn't it?
Yeah, it is yours.
Okay. Woohoo. Do we, Vlad? Such a good name, honestly. If I could have gotten away with calling my half Irish child Vlad, I so would have done. Such a cool name.
Vlad, can you tell us? Is it Vladimir? Is it Vladislav? Is it something else that is none of the above?
Yeah, we want to
Clearly,
know what's the full version, Vlad, or it could just be Vlad.
it
Let's
could
be
be just be
honest.
Vlad. Yeah, yeah.
It could
I'm
be.
making a huge assumption here. It could just be Vlad,
Vlad,
but
like Alex. Lots of people are just Alex rather than Alexander or Alexandra. They just Alex. So maybe he's
it's
just
just
Vlad.
Alex. Yeah, indeed.
Yeah. Anyway, do we have to inject data points into each star story? Uh, ev- Wherever possible, inject data points, especially in your results. I know there are some stories that data points just don't make any sense, but they should be few and far between. Amazon wants to ultimately understand your impact as a result of your efforts. And it's quite hard to describe impact if you cannot articulate a state A moving to state B and the contribution that is making to your organization. So if you happen to not have a data point for one or two of your stories, it's not the end of the world, but you should be aiming to try and get data points into the vast majority of the results section of your stories. Okay, do you
Cool.
want to take the next one?
Yes. So some feedback here. So
Oh, some feedback on
apparently
the facial head. This is the way.
this is the way. And Vlad, all I can say is this is the way.
This is the way. Have you been
Um,
watching? Have you been watching Andor, by the way?
no,
No.
I
You're not a
haven't.
Star Wars. You're not a Star Wars person.
No, I am, but I've watched it through the entire Mandalorian. By the way, you have the amazing impression of how do you call what's that chick that makes all the Beskar stuff for them?
The
What's her
chick
name?
who makes what?
Beskar. You know the works in the forge. What's her role in the
Oh,
comic?
oh, I can't remember who she is, but I know you. I know the one you mean.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Mabe
Right.
loves her, wants to be her.
Let's keep going. So, that was helpful. Thanks. When discussing functional topics, i.e., vendor management or security operations, should I apply the same star format as LPs? Do you know what? It really depends on uh, how this topic brings itself about. For example, do they ask you a functional question that has something to do with the functional aspects of vendor management or security operations? They might ask you a hypothetical question. They might ask you a behavioral question straight up, like tell me about a time when you negotiated
Mm,
difficult terms with a strategic vendor or something like that. And then you have a menu of options on how you can respond to these questions. So if the question is asked in a tell me about a time, clearly a behavioral format, clearly asking for the past experience, then use the STAR method and tell a story exactly as you would for your um, leadership principles based interview responses. If they're asking you a hypothetical, how would you approach a scenario of 1, 2, 3, and 5? My advice that I'm giving to my clients, and it would be great if Gigi, if you could share yours, is if you have something like this that you've done in the past, volunteer to respond to a hypothetical with a behavioral, because behaviorals are just very powerful because they bring a lot of evidence. They show that you've dealt with exactly the same problem before. They bring dependability with them. That being said, some interviewers might respond by saying, well, actually, no, can you just think about how you would handle this situation in a hypothetical sense, which is an indicator that they just want to give your brain a test drive and see how you would sort of conceptualize a solution to something like this in there. So, and in which case, in terms of solving a hypothetical question, to be honest, I don't have a framework for answering hypotheticals. I'm just trying always to be structured, and at the very, very, very least, when you're answering a hypothetical question, talk about assumptions that you're making and the
mm,
data that you don't have, just to
mhm,
be very upfront with them that, obviously, when you're answering a hypothetical, you're going to be pulling some assumptions out of complete thin air. Some of them would be based on some of the experience that you've had with something similar back in the past, and then some of them will be completely random. They might give you some data, they may not give you some data, so just set the ground with them, just level with them by saying that, look, this is what I have, this is the data that I don't have, these are the kinds of assumptions that I have to make. This one I'm making because I've had some experience with something like this in the past. This one I'm just completely have no idea, and unless you give me some data, I'm just going to say, yeah, it's probably, the answer is probably 42. And then and then have at the very least have a numbered list framework. So the first, second, third, fifth. So that would be my piece of advice. But how would you approach this, Gigi?
no differently other than to add to your point about assumptions, it is always worth asking any clarifying questions that you need. So if you know you need certain bits of information in order to be able to plan how you would act in that situation, it's always worth saying, okay, so just for clarification then, can I just check what's this, or how would this work, or blah blah blah. And if their feedback is just assume something, then you need to follow it Yevgeny's path and make sure that when you assume, you call out what you assume. But sometimes you can get helpful directions from the interviewer by just asking them to just kind of clarify some things for you. Okay. Vlad is back. What is the importance of recent executive diploma degree? Is it worth mentioning during the interview? No. If it's on your resume, they'll know you have it. Amazon is not especially interested in qualifications once you go past the resume review stage. You know, they say they want certain qualifications. If you've got them on your resume, and that will then move you through to the next stage. But I've never in my entire career at Amazon asked anybody about their qualifications, nor heard any other interviewer, what heard, seen notes from any other interviewer deep diving into somebody's qualifications. So unless it's super specific to the role and there's some kind of particular niche skill that you have in terms that they are looking for, I don't know, I can't even think of what random qualifications might be out there, but nah, don't bother.
Pre-construction project
Yes,
engineer.
exactly.
Hey.
Pre-construction project manager, phase 17, shift PVT17.
Yes, we love
Right.
pre-construction managers. Right. So next one here is: would you recommend brainstorming up to 20-25 stories, even if some of them are only high level and not fully detailed? Any tips on how to generate stories based on leadership principles? Right. So I see the question that you've asked me. I'm gonna answer a different question. Um,
I always think
because
the new Prime Minister of Canada does that really well. He always says, "Can I just extend the scope of your question, please?" And then goes on and answers a completely different question.
well, Connie,
Mark Carney, yeah.
that's an interesting.
Yeah, pay attention. Can I extend the scope of your question a bit? And then he answers a completely different question. I'm
that
waiting for
is a
someone to say no.
well. That's no. That would be the test of it, right? I suspect he would still go ahead and do this anyway. But
Sure he
um,
would.
the reason why I'm going to do this is because I know what you're getting at, right? But I just think that the question is worded in a slightly incorrect way. So generally speaking, you don't brainstorm, because for me brainstorm is invention, right? Complete invention from thin air, right? And ending up with what we call a bank of stories, or a story bank, for your interview. It's a combination of different mental processes. Brainstorming is one of them. The most important one of them is number one, learning what's needed, right? Because they aren't just looking for random examples of the stuff that you've done, like just random problems you've solved, or even stuff that you're necessarily proud about. They're looking for stories that demonstrate behaviors that they are interested in, right? So each time you tell a story to Amazon, you're selling something. You're selling a part of your expertise and a part of your accomplishment pedigree, and that something has to link to leadership principles. So learning is the first cognitive process that you have to go through. You need to actually go and understand, like, what is it that Amazon actually want from me under these LPs. Cognitive process number two, you actually need to recall something. You're going down the memory lane, so that's still we're still not at the brainstorming stage. And in order to recall stuff, you need to prompt your brain. Your brain's a bit like ChatGPT. You need to put it some prompts, right? When was the time when I was at my best, demonstrating this and that behavior? And then your brain starts thinking, oh, it starts fishing out these memories. And these memories initially, they're going to be indeed very high level. These sometimes it will be just like a memory of a feeling of how you felt when you got something accomplished, right? It could be in various different shapes and forms, but that recall, that's the second thing that you're going to be doing. And at the time of that recall, in most cases, you're going to have these skeletons of stories, that little kind of like, flashes of memory in front of you, and you need to, and at that point in time, we recommend that you capture them as these little snippets, these skeletons. Sure, sometimes, especially for more recent examples, you're going to have full-fledged stories that you will be dying to just type up. And I would say, maybe resist that and just generate the breadth of those memory nuggets, and then try and kind of again reprompt your memory to get those details out, and and write them out in Star, or if you're one of the students that has our paid courses, then um, in our answer framework. In the end, you need 2 stories per leadership principle. So for an average level 6 interview, assuming it's a non-technical role, you're going to have 5 interviews. So that's 10 leadership principles. That's 20 stories. So that's the number of content that you will have. Where does brainstorming come through here? It might come through in a way of how you want to express those stories, which bits of the actual situational work you want to leave out, which bits you want to kind of leave in. But generally speaking, it's more of a pyramid learning and recall exercise rather than brainstorming. Anything you would mention, Gigi?
Um, just to sum up and say, well, I'm going to answer his question a little bit more directly in terms of um, even if some are only high level and not fully detailed, there's no point in going into an Amazon interview with a story that you don't have details for, because they'll ask you the details and then you'll be stuck. So no, there is no point going in with a story that is simply very high level and you can't remember any of the details on. Okay, so hi team, I have a phone screen interview next week for this position, right? A marketing lead for something at AWS. What is the main focus? What is the main focus of Amazon LPs to focus on, right? Which are the 2 expected functional questions, right? Don't know the answer to either of those questions. So back read the situation is there are no leadership principles that are forcefully assigned to specific jobs. A hiring manager gets to decide what leadership principles they are most interested in testing for the role that they are hiring. They can choose whatever they like, and 2 senior marketing managers or whoever it is that you're going to end up working for may not choose exactly the same leadership principles because their teams are going to be different and their needs are going to be different. So can't answer either of those questions. What you need to do is go and look at the job description and literally read it through line by line, word by word. To Yevgeny's point a minute ago, you have to first really, really understand the leadership principles and really understand what behaviors are indicative of each leadership principle. And then you read the job description and you read the language of the job description and try and connect what that language is intimating as regards the type of behavior and therefore what leadership principle that behavior links to. So there are a couple of videos on the YouTube channel where you can see me doing that live, and they're definitely worth looking at and working through. The other thing that's worth doing is asking your recruiter if they're willing to either share with you the key leadership principles for the role, or if you want to be a bit more subtle, you can ask them what type of behaviors would someone who is successful in this role need to demonstrate, that type of thing. So you can go direct to your recruiter. I think chances are about 50-50. When I work with my candidates from a coaching point of view, I'd say about 50% of them manage to get an answer from their recruiter and 50% don't. But there's no black marks against your name if you ask and they can't tell you. And then obviously the same answer for your functional. There are tens of thousands of job families in Amazon. Yevgeny and I cannot be experts on exactly what functional questions are going to be asked across tens of thousands of job families, I'm afraid. The very best person to ask those questions of is going to be your recruiter. Do you want to pick the next one, Yevgeny?
Yes. So are we doing the commercial break today? Are we
Oh,
skipping it?
yeah, we'll do that briefly. Okay, folks. So where are we? I love the way we call it a commercial break. It makes it sound so much more exciting than it really is. All right, folks. So Yevgeny and I have a teeny tiny favor to ask you, and that is that in return for all of the effort that we've clearly put into this channel and these sessions and our blog, if you've had a chance to see our blog and the free content that we're going to give you at the end of the session, so on and so forth, we have a small favor, and that is whenever you watch any of our content, be it the live or be it one of the videos off the YouTube channel, please either give it a thumbs up or write a little comment. What that does is it tells YouTube that number one, they have chosen the right person to serve this content to, and number two, having watched this content, this person likes it. That then gives a boost to the day one careers content in the algorithm so that more people who are looking for honest, direct, accurate insight into the Amazon interview process are going to be able to find us, and we will be able to find them. So, in the spirit of practice, because practice makes perfect, we're going to ask you to very, very briefly give this stream a thumbs up whilst we're here, and then we will go back to answering questions. So here we go. This one isn't particularly loud, actually. I usually say, oh, it's loud. You have to take your headphones off your, but this one isn't. So here we go. Please, please like the stream. Like the stream. Like the stream. Like the stream. There we go, folks. That was relatively painless, I think. So if you haven't already, and I've just quickly jumped on to see how many likes there are, definitely you haven't all liked the stream yet. I can see that here on my left. So please, it's a teeny, tiny, weeny favor. We would be grateful. All right, shall we get on with the questions then?
Yeah, let's do it. So next one from Pixie. If an interviewer hears a story they don't like, or that's slightly off target, do they usually signal that or just move on? I don't have an answer to that because I've seen and done just about everything. Sometimes I just allow the candidate to tell it, and hoping that with my follow-ups I can tease out the right data that I have or the right information. Sometimes if the candidate was completely off piece, then I would say, well, actually that that doesn't look like it's answering my question. Do you have anything else? But I'm pretty sure there's like a 55 million ways that the interviewers can handle this. What's your experience, Gigi?
Yeah, it's the same. It's a judgment call. It's completely a judgment call, and different people even have different preferences around how they play it. So there's no answer to that. You just need to be prepared for any response, either guiding you in the right direction, asking you for a new question, or I mean, I have to be honest with you, sometimes I've waited so long thinking that the candidate would get to what I'm hoping they'll get to, and then I realize they're never getting there, and I'm so far along in listening to the story, it makes no sense to stop them and start them all over again. So I just let them finish the story, and then I make an assessment of what leadership principle that story fits better, and then I'll ask them follow-up questions for that leadership principle rather than the leadership principle I was aiming for. And then in my analysis, I would give them and assess them based on the appropriate leadership principle rather than the leadership principle I was trying to test them on. But sometimes I've stopped people and said, you've gone in the wrong direction. Sometimes I've stopped people at the end of the story and say, can you give me a different story if I've got time? Yeah, any and all. All right. Right, that. What LP should be selected for questions like tell me when things went terribly wrong? I've Vlad, where is this question coming from? Because I have never ever heard anybody ask anyone tell us a time when something went terribly wrong. Because to your point, it could cover any leadership principle. It's utterly unspecific. What they want to know is your reaction to something going terribly wrong, and therefore the question needs to guide you in a direction where the reaction is in the context of the behaviors of the leadership principle they're looking for. So Vlad, I'm sure you're going to tell me that someone actually asked you that question, and I'll have to kind of eat my shorts as regards me saying that they shouldn't, but no one should ever ask you that question, because where do you go with it? Impossible to know. Would you say,
But
Evgeny?
you know what the problem is, though, right? Because I think I know where these questions are all coming from. They're all over the internet.
Internet, yeah, just nonsense that's scattered around the web. Yeah.
Yeah, folks, wait until the end, because we're going to give you a surefire way, a massive freebie that will help you avoid stumbling upon questions that Amazon will never ask you and wasting time preparing to answer questions that Amazon will never ask you. But you have to wait until the end of the show. Should I pick the next one?
Yep. Vlad's name is Vladislav.
Oh, Vladislav. Perfect. See, Right. Samuel, what are some of the common pitfalls to watch out for during the loop interviews? And and just to confirm, will we know who the bar raiser is ahead of time? Is that typically not disclosed? So on the last bit, based on my interview, based on my experience, while I was at Amazon, and based on all the experience of the coaching clients that I've had and folks who pass through our community, in most cases, no one tells them who the bar raiser is. You can figure this out because it's the person who's not part of the team that's interviewing you. If you have their title and team included in the roster of interviewers, and if they sent you the roster of the interviewers, whether you should actually bother figuring out who the bar raiser is or doing anything special about how you interview with the bar raisers, the answer is no. It's a complete waste of your time. So I would say just ignore it. When it comes to what are the common faults to watch out for during the loop interviews, gosh, where do I start? I mean, my key thing would be, your question relates to watch out during the loop interview. So I'm just going to assume that your question isn't related to prepping for the loop interviews. So during the loop interviews, the biggest pitfall that I've experienced is when candidates or coaching clients are answering questions that I never asked, and they never bothered to clarify. And if they don't have the right the specific context that I'm looking for, they try to respond with something else, and so it goes kind of from bad to worse because we end up spending a lot of time with me listening to a story that actually either answers the question poorly or just does not answer the question, so I cannot grade it. And if I was still working at Amazon, at best I would grade the answer as, sorry, I couldn't actually understand. Did the candidate share any evidence that shows that that they can demonstrate these leadership principles? I'd be like, I don't know. Some interviewers will go the opposite way and say that actually it's the opposite way. So I would say always, as we say, Gigi and I always say, answer the blooming question. That would be the biggest pitfall that I've seen. What about you, Gigi?
Yes, that's my top one, and that's definitely the top complaint that I heard as a bar raiser when I was listening to other interviewers. I think the second one actually goes back to what you were saying earlier, Yevgeny, which is talking too fast. If your interviewer cannot capture what you say because you've talked so fast, because the vast majority of interviewers will not make a decision either on early rounds there and then, they're not supposed to. They will wait some hours or even a day to then go back to their notes and review their notes. They won't remember everything you said. That's why they type it down. So if you've spoken too fast and they haven't been able to capture what you said accurately, you may as well have never said it. So, and then it's very true for loops. Quite often people won't get to their notes until a good few days afterwards because the debrief isn't going to be for maybe 4 or 5 days. So I think the second biggest thing is just talking too fast. I have a favorite tip that I share with my clients, candidates, whatever we want to call it, which is pay very close attention to the speed at which somebody talks when they introduce themselves to you. Generally, people can process auditory inputs at more or less the same speed as they speak. So I'm a very fast speaker, and therefore I can process, not that one or the other is any smarter, that's just about speed of absorption. I can absorb information quite quickly and type it up quite quickly. You'll notice when even in these sessions, Yevgeny has a much more measured speaking pace than I do. And funnily enough, he told us earlier on that he's a slow typer. So if Yevgeny introduces himself and says, "Hi, I'm Yevgeny, how are you?" You kind of know, okay, I'm going to have to speak at a pace that probably matches Yevgeny, and then Yevgeny will be comfortable. If it's me and I say, "Hi, I'm Gigi, how are you? How's it going? If you had a good day?" you know that you can probably babble outrageously, and I'll probably be able to keep up with you. So I think that's probably my best tip for how to manage your speaking pace when you go into a interview. Should we pick another one?
Yes, next one is
Okay.
yours, and oddly enough, it's also about pitfalls
I think, yeah, it's the same question, right? Isn't it? A different
from someone.
person, but same question. Yeah, we know it's same question, different person,
Yeah.
which is weird. And oh, one is Sam. Samuel, are you using have you got two usernames and you're on with us on two different machines? So we have covered that question. I'm going to pick this next one. Okay. Surab, so you have a loop coming up in the next week for a program L5. So I think you mean a program manager, L5. You've got a question for your stories. A, is it okay to repeat the situation, but action results can be changed, cannot make 15 strong ones? Yeah, okay. I think definitely permission to repeat stories gets less and less as you get more and more senior, because the more senior you are, you should have a greater breadth of high performance stories, because if you're more senior, you should be able to, perform at a higher level more consistently. So as an L5, I don't think it's a major problem to repeat a couple of stories through the process, particularly in the kind of loop. It's definitely okay, and I like the approach that you've taken here, to have the same situation, but then it's not the actions that change. You need to have your task change, right? Because your actions are a consequence of your task. So it's impossible to have different actions if you haven't got a different task. So you need to go up one level. It's fine to have the situation the same, but your actual task needs to vary, and therefore your actions will vary because you're chasing after a different task, and then the results will vary because then the results come about as a different set of actions which you are undertaking to achieve a different task. Make sense? So yes, you're fine, but take that up one level. Task has to vary, and then everything cascades from there. You can pick the
Excellent.
next one.
Yeah, I'll pick the next one. Okay, so next one is um
Oh,
this
we're getting lots of repeats here. What's going on?
one. I think it has to do with StreamYard's API connection.
Oh, really? Is it
Really
messing up?
that's my hypothesis. Um
You're probably right, because you're always right, because you're Yevgeny.
no, I'm just thinking if it was me, I would be too lazy to copy and paste multiple times.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Right. So, how much does the quality of the candidate's follow-ups at the end of the interview influence your impression? Again, it's a good one. There's impression, and then there's the evaluation of the actual interview response. So, technically speaking, they're not meant to assign any value to your follow-up questions because that's just for you. But in reality, you might it's not about impressing so much with your follow-up questions, so it's more about avoiding annoying your interviewer with questions that you've just copy pasted from the interview from the internet. Technically speaking, they're not meant to base their evaluation on your follow-ups. In reality, humans are humans and biases are biases. So my guidance is follow-up questions. For sure, have some follow-up questions. Don't just say, no, I'm not interested in anything. Have some follow-up questions that are genuine. It's something that you are genuinely interested in. Don't try to use your Q&A time with the interviewer as a way to manipulate the interview outcome. Make them something that's personal to you. Have the same questions for every interviewer, or have different questions for different interviewers. I've seen people do all sorts of strategies. My personal strategy as a candidate with both Amazon, Apple, and all other companies that I've interviewed for is I've had exactly the same set of questions, and I was trying to triangulate responses from different people so that I can understand different perspectives on the same issue. But that's just my kind of way around it, and that way it almost guarantees that you're not going to be one of those people who just read an article on the internet from someone who never interviewed at Amazon as a candidate or never interviewed anyone as an Amazonian interviewer or a hiring manager. And in that article, they would say, pay attention. It's super strategically important that you ask the right follow-up questions. Only here you will find the ultimate guide to asking follow-up questions for Amazon. Pay us £999. Yeah. So anyway, I'll shut up. Would you have any different approach to this, DG?
No, like you say, in theory, no one's supposed to make them part of the evaluation. Sometimes humans are human. So as long as you don't ask really stupid, annoying questions. Actually, there's one thing that I will guard against, which I absolutely hated as an interviewer, which is don't ask a question because you want to tell the interviewer something that you didn't get to tell them in the interview, and you're using your question time to then be able to tell it to them. So, for example, long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, to keep the Star Trek theme, Star Wars theme going, I remember interviewing a candidate who asked me a question about, I think, Amazon's approach to women, promotion, supporting women. So I gave her the general spiel about, we have Amazon tries to be completely non-biased. There's lots of women support groups run by the community, blah, blah, blah. They have over the past few years put focus on trying to understand why there's a cliff in terms of women at level 7 and the less mix of level 8 being women, blah, blah, blah. And then she said, "Oh, that's great to know because I won an award for the best woman entrepreneur in India and blah, blah, blah." And then she went on and gave me this literally whole spiel about her winning this award because she obviously felt that she wanted to tell it to me, but she hadn't had a chance in the interview. So she engineered a question to me of which she obviously had no interest whatsoever in hearing my answer to, just so that she could then land this extra piece of insight or information, which quite honestly, I wasn't very interested in whether she'd won an award for the best woman entrepreneur or not. It was in her resume. I'd already read it and I was really miffed by that. And actually, I was a no hire on her, but the team managed to convince me to change my mind. But that's another story. So only ask questions you genuinely want the answer to Yevgeny's point. Okay, I like this. So this one from Luke. All right. So the question is, in what case would you ask follow-up questions? If so, do they ask until they understand the approach or answer, or would they just want to justify the answers genuine or not? Yeah, there's a few different. So Yevgeny and I are working on I don't know. So I've been thinking about how people interview and how best to approach follow-up questions. And having thought about it, I bucketed them into effectively 3 categories. The first category is kind of probing questions, where someone has said something that actually you think there's probably more interesting data in there, but they just forgot to mention it. So someone might have said sales talking something very briefly about something that actually you think is quite interesting in regards to the leadership principle you're looking for. So you probe, you say, "Oh, okay, you just briefly mentioned X a few minutes ago. Can we just go a bit deeper into X so I can get a little bit more information?" So that might be where if I was testing someone at Earn Trust and they told me I had a meeting with them and we had a really good conversation and we managed to align at the end of it, I'd be interested in knowing what happened in that meeting, right? So I would use a probing follow-up question to try and draw out more data on that meeting to see how they conducted themselves in that meeting. So that's one. The second type of follow-up question is, I think, to your point here, which I call a challenging follow-up question. So this is when you kind of want to, my old manager used to call it press the flesh, which is always a bit creepy to me, but it does work in the sense of where you want to really make sure that what you're hearing is genuine and that what you're not being told is some story that candidates have pre-prepared that isn't true. So you challenge them. Okay, what other options did you consider? Why did you choose that particular option? What do you think about choosing this other option? Who did you talk to? And where you really start to dig into, am I really, number one, getting a true story? And number two, do I like the logic and the thought processes behind why this person chose this particular pathway. The third one I call helping hand, which is where it mainly happens on data points, actually, where candidates just don't realize that a certain data point or a certain bit of information is really important to giving impact for their story. So, for example, if a candidate would say to me, sales went up and we had a really good year, I'd go back and I'd say, okay, you said sales went up. How much did sales go up by? Give me a percentage. You said you had a really good year. Okay, what did the year look like and how does that compare to an average year? So, things that we know we need to do as candidates, i.e., put data points in. If they forget, you can give them a helping hand. So, that's the three that I would categorize as being the main ones, but nobody's looking for, oh, and I guess there is a fourth one, which I didn't think about before. Damn it. Maybe I should. Okay. Damn. Um, Clarification. If you're lost completely in the story, a follow-up question might just be to clarify your understanding of the situation. So I quite often just stop candidates, even if I'm not completely confused, but I just want to make sure that I have the story correct. I'll often stop candidates and say, hang on a second, can I just play back to you very briefly what I think I've heard? And I give it back to them, and then they can tell me, yes, you've got that right, or no, Gigi, you probably weren't listening to me properly. Pay attention more in the future. So I think there's four. I thought there were three, but there are four. Damn it. That's it. And you just have to pick the one in the moment. No one goes into a interview saying, I'm going to ask one helping hand question, one challenging question, one clarifying question. You just kind of roll with it in the actual moment, which is part of the skill of being a good interviewer. Okay, next
Cool.
one for you.
Next one.
Oh, we've only got like 3 minutes left. Okay, do you want to do one and then we can, oh gosh, there's loads we've missed. God damn it. Do one more and then we can do the freebies, and then hopefully people can put their questions into the actual YouTube channel.
Okay, so this one is a quick one. So how do you manage silence or pauses during the interview? Um, so I'm assuming it's the silence or pause when you answered a follow-up question of sorts. I would just I would just create a pregnant pause and and see what the interviewer says, because again, some of the interviewers at Amazon you will encounter is that they need to actually process what you said in order to generate the next follow-up question. You can try and facilitate it sometimes if you want by saying that, if you want me to delve into any more details, I'd be more than happy to, in which case your interviewer will say, yes, actually I wanted to follow up on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or they could say, actually no, that's fine, and I had something else in mind, and then they will ask you something else. But don't be like, there's no particular way. Don't try to keep filling the pauses intentionally with more stuff, right? When you hand the mic back to the interviewer after answering the question, you properly hand the mic back. At best, just offer courteously to share more details, and then that's it. Just leave it with them and they'll figure it out. Anything you do differently, Gigi?
No, just if there's quiet, keep quiet. Let them fill the gap in terms of moving you on to the next thing.
Let them unmute themselves.
Yeah, exactly. All right, should we do the freebies?
Yes. Do you want me to
Right, no,
announce
I'm there now. I'm there. Right. Oh, it's on your side today for me. Is it on your side for you? I'm so
There it
bad at
is.
this. There it is. Right. Okay. So, folks, we're going to rattle through this because I'm sure you're desperate to go on to your next appointment. So, do go to this link. At the end of this link, there are 3 amazing things that you will not get from any other Amazon interview preparation or any generic job interview preparation site anywhere on the planet, I guarantee. So, the first thing is we will give you a little taster sample of our flagship course, the Amazon Interview Success System. The Amazon Interview Success System is basically a course that walks you step by step through preparing for your Amazon interview, from nothing, having no idea how to start, all the way through to having all of your stories completely optimized and good to go. we've just given you a little snippet of that, and that snippet is focused on understanding the leadership's part of the course. So it will talk you through the different ways that you can go into a leadership principle. Each leadership principle actually kind of has somewhere between 2 and 4 different flavors within that leadership principle. We call them facets. So this one talks you through customer obsession. So you'll be able to see these different facets of customer obsession, and that will help you pick stories aligned to those facets. What it also does is it tells you what the interviewer is looking for in your answer to customer obsession. So you can look down that list and ask yourself, am I presenting evidence of this particular thing that the interviewer is looking for? And you can then fill your story up if you've missed that bit. So that's one thing that we're offering you. The other thing we're offering you is the Amazon Interview Preparation Tool Pack. Again, very pithy name. It's got a few different models in there, but the most interesting thing in that pack is a list, a very comprehensive list of what we call plausible Amazon interview questions. So they're not the exact Amazon interview questions. We can give you those, but we do understand well enough what the Amazon interviewers are looking for to come up with a very solid list of our own that you can use for practice. Don't expect those exact questions to come up in the interview, but they are very, very, very useful for practice. The last thing you'll get if you take out either of those is access to our Heartbeat community. In our Heartbeat community, we have over 6,000 people registered who either previously interviewed at Amazon or are currently interviewing at Amazon. Two really main features there that you can benefit from. The first is we have trained a ChatGPT model on all of the content from our YouTube channel. So if you have any questions about the Amazon interview process or anything that you think you want to know, instead of trawling through the channel, you can just go to that chatbot and ask Andy, who is the chatbot's name, your question, and he will answer it for you. The other thing there is a specific channel for you to be able to make friends with other people who are interviewing at Amazon and buddy up and do practice interviews between the two of you. So really very comprehensive set of freebies. Like I said, nowhere else is going to give you anything of that quality and breadth. So please do go and get it. You have no reason not to. If we didn't manage to get to your story, your question, sorry, this time round, I'm very sorry. But what you can do, just copy and paste your question from the chat box there into any of the videos on the YouTube channel, and Yevgeny and I will work through them over the next couple of days and get back to you. So nothing is a loss here if you didn't get your question answered. Just take the time to copy and paste it into the YouTube channel, and we will eventually get back to you. All right. Okay. Thank you, Yevgeny. I'm very much looking forward to next week's growth and progress, and I will see you all then.
See you all there. Take care.
Take care, bud. Nice to see you.
Same.
Bye.